Hey, good people. Ricky Harleen here for The Frugal Photographer, and today I'm going to be making a companion video for my article, The Best Digital Camera for the Money. Now today what we're going to be talking about are lenses, because lenses make the biggest difference in your image quality, and they're also what photographers spend the most money on. Now, in the recent years, Sigma and Tamron and these other companies have been making increasingly good lenses for cheap. And this means that there's less of a difference than there used to be between the different manufacturers. However, there are still considerable differences. So let's jump on in. So Sigma makes their 10 to 20 for crop body for, Canon, Nikon, Sony A-mount, Pentax. So if you just want a good 10 to 20 ultra wide angle lens, you can pick any. As this is true of most any focal length you want. You'll find that you can get the same lens for any of the major manufacturers. But Canon does have their own ultra wide angle for crop body. They're 10 to 18, and it is optically similar, and it costs about the same amount of money. But the reason why you might want the Canon specifically is it's smaller and lighter a fair bit. So that's very attractive to a lot of photographers, and also has vibration control. Now, for a lot of stills photographers, this really doesn't matter, but if you're using it for video, that can be a pretty big deal. It is important to note that a lot of Sony A-mount cameras have in-body image stabilization, so you could get a Sony A68 or whatever, and throw the Sigma 10 to 20 on there, and have a stabilized rig, getting you basically the same end result. But I just wanted to note that this might be a reason to choose Canon. Canon is really well known for their long telephoto primes. So their 300mm f4 is a really good value. You might be thinking this is expensive, but if you think it's expensive, go look at Nikon's or Pentax or whatever. This is definitely a really good value. And then the 400mm f5.6, which is I think what most people would pick for wildlife and stuff like this. But the thing to note is the frugal photographer is less and less compelled towards these Canon primes, because companies like Tamron are making the 150 to 600, which is not that much slower, f6.3 at the long end. It's not as good image quality as the Canon 400mm, but you can have one wildlife lens, right? And it's really versatile. So that's a really compelling argument, and I think that's why we're seeing more and more people using this for wildlife. Now, if you're super serious about wildlife and you're on a budget, I would urge you to get the Canon 400mm f5.6 and just shoot Canon, and that's the end of the story. But if you're not, if these images are only going to go on Facebook, if you're not trying to sell them and make it as a wildlife photographer, you're probably better off with the versatility of one of these giant zoom lenses. Now, if you want kind of the short telephoto zooms, Nikon has just the best deal that there is. Their 80 to 200 f2.8 is just incredibly cheap. A 70 to 200 new is like $2,500. This doesn't have vibration control or vibration reduction, I think Nikon calls it. So that's why a lot of professionals don't use it. But optically, it's very good. So there's no reason why you can't. And the thing is a lot of people don't need vibration reduction, right? You're doing portraits, this kind of lens gets used a lot for that, or you're doing fast things where you'd have a high shutter speed anyway. So the vibration reduction isn't really helping you very much. So there's two different types. You have this old push-pull, which you can see right here, and it's cheaper, and it has slower autofocus. And then you have the newer style. It's got the two rings, one changes your focal length and one changes your focus. And that's more expensive. Now, if you're serious about getting one of these lenses, I highly recommend that you go check out a chart that Ken Rockwell has put together that compares all the various submodels, because there's like 5 or 6 of them. If you're having a hard time finding that link, I have it in my article. So go check out my article, The Best Digital Camera for the Money, Part 3. And I know I said we weren't going to talk about camera bodies, but I just wanted to say real quick that if you want a camera body to throw some old manual focus lenses on, you can get one of these old NEX, Sony crop sensor NEX cameras for just absurdly cheap. Here's one for $60, right? And the reason why you'd want to do something like this, I mean, so you could shoot Fuji or Micro Four Thirds, Olympus, whatever floats your boat. It doesn't matter. But the reason why you would do this is so you can get a great lens like this Tokina 35 to 70 f2.8, which I have, and I think is just an incredible lens. And you can get amazing results for absurdly cheap. Now you can get a $15 adapter. In this case, it'd be Nikon to E-mount. Or the other thing you can do is you can get a speed booster, which is about $130, and it collects all that light from the large lens down onto your crop sensor, and now you have versatility because your lens can be the equivalent of like, what is that, like a 50 to 105, or it can be an actual 35 to 70 with the speed booster, and you also get an extra stop of light, a little less than an extra stop of light, but about an extra stop of light. So you can shoot at a lower ISO at night and stuff like this. And I really love this. Certainly it has some shortcomings. You don't have autofocus, but manual focus lenses are just really a joy to use. They feel so much nicer to use than modern autofocus lenses. If you're into street photography, I think you ought to use manual focus lenses and learn how to do zone focusing or use your hyperfocal distance so that everything's just in focus all the time. And I just want to show you real quick, like, say you want some Pentax lenses. Look at how cheap these things are. And these aren't even the best deals that you can find. You can look at old Minolta MD, which is the old mount that Sony doesn't use anymore. You can look at Canon FD, which is the old Canon mount that you can't use anymore on the modern Canon cameras. And there's just a lot of good deals out there. And I highly recommend it. Now, if you do want to use manual focus lenses, you don't have to use a mirrorless camera. You could shoot Nikon. You can Nikon hasn't changed their mount, so you can go buy a lens from the 1960s and throw it on your modern Nikon camera, and it will work. But it just gives you like a little arrow saying turn the focus ring left or turn it right, and then it shows you when it's in focus. And I found that this is actually more precise than the way that mirrorless cameras display it being in focus, which is to show like a color. You can set it to yellow or red or whatever. You just look on the screen, and then when your subject turns yellow around the edges, it's in focus. So if you want to be able to use a manual focus quickly, shoot mirrorless. But one of the frustrating things about shooting manual lenses on a mirrorless is sometimes it's not accurate. And most of the time, it's not a huge deal. I have had a couple times where it's just been way off. Like, I very specifically remember it telling me it was in focus, and then I look at the picture and I'm like, whoa, that's not even close. So if you want more precise, slower focusing with manual focus lenses, get a Nikon D7000 or something like that, and do that. But if you want to walk around the street or shoot events or something, and you for some reason want to use a manual focus lens, I would recommend going with a mirrorless camera. Now, this is not as good of a point as the rest of the points I have to make in this video, but I just want to say, if you want to shoot one of the more expensive formats like Sony E-mount or Fuji or Olympus, it's not that it's impossible to do it affordably. It's impossible to do it affordably and own a lot of native lenses. So one thing I've done is I have the A6000 and I have this 16 to 70 Zeiss F4, which I really like. I think it's a great lens. And it's less than $800 new. It's supposed to be $1,000, but someone's selling it on eBay new for less than $800. This is where I got mine. It's a great lens. And basically, it doesn't come off my camera that much. When it does come off my camera, it's to put on one of my old Nikon lenses, which is probably from the 60s or the 70s or something. Now, one of the best deals in all of photography is the Sony A-mount system. There's just a ton of lenses for cheap, and this is one of the best deals. So there's in the A-mount world, it's colloquially known as the beer can. It's a 70 to 210 millimeter f4. It's a very good lens, very sharp, great value, just an incredible value. There's tons of them, and so you can't sell them for that much, which is great for the buyer. So just look at how cheap these are. It's incredible, right? There's some that are more, but you can find them on eBay all day for less than $80. I love that. Or here's another really great value. Here's a high quality 100 millimeter macro, a genuine 1-to-1 macro lens you can find on eBay for all day for less than $200. Like, where are you going to find that, right? That's a great value. A-mount does have a good value, 80 to 200 f2.8. It's not as good of a value as Nikon's. So it is, I would say that Minolta's 80 to 200 is a reason to shoot Sony A mount, but not as compelling a reason as Nikon's 80 to 200. Now, there's a ton of lenses that are a great value for Minolta, for Sony A mount. I'm just going to pick one to give you an example. So a 75 to 300, fairly slow maximum aperture lens is just really, really cheap on Sony A mount. It's not particularly expensive for Canon or Nikon, but when it's this cheap, if that's what you want, why not shoot A mount, right? It's really cheap. So to me, there's a really compelling reason, a really compelling argument for shooting Sony A mount. But if any of the other lenses for the other systems represent a really significant value, if you want one of those, then I think that it would make a lot of sense to pick Canon or Nikon. So regarding Pentax, I like Pentax a lot. There's a lot of things I like about Pentax, but their lens selection is problematic for me. If there's a lens that you want, sometimes it's hard to find. Like, it'll be hit or miss. You'll find it some days, you want the other. Their lens library is not huge. A mounts is also smaller. Sony A mounts lens selection is smaller than Canon's and Nikon's. But I feel like maybe it was more popular back in the day. I don't know, but I feel like it's much easier to find these lenses than it is for Pentax. So the only reason why I, as a frugally minded photographer, would choose Pentax would be if I wanted that weather sealing, if that was really important to me, if I was going out into the desert, if I wanted a Burning Man camera or something like that. Absolutely, I would choose Pentax. But I think the best deals in photography are absolutely with Canon, Nikon, and Sony A mount. So stick around to stay tuned. Keep an eye on this channel, because next time we're going to be talking about the best value in camera bodies.